My first question would be on migration. I know, Ms. Mogherini, that you were planning to visit a place for a center for refugees here in Sofia. I don't know if you did. But maybe we can talk a little bit about all this, the specter of the migrants from the south who are coming here, whom we on the one hand don't want, on the other hand we understand that these are people running away from war. This seems to be a very difficult dilemma for the EU. How do you think it should be resolved? What's the realistic scenario, probably?
First of all, the realistic scenario is, normally I'm so optimistic that I risk to be defined naive, but the realistic scenario here is that this is a phenomenon that is not only not going away anytime soon, but increasing in the future. That's very clear. Poverty, inequalities, climate change and natural disasters, wars, conflicts, massive violation of human rights in large parts of the world. All of this is not going to finish tomorrow morning, even if we work very hard for this to happen. And it is only natural that human beings decide, choose, and sometimes are forced to leave, risking all they have, including the life and life of their children, to find hope. This is in human nature. And we are fooling ourselves if we even think that this is something that can be contained or stopped anytime soon. It's not. And we are going to have to deal with this for years, if not decades, to come. So we better realize it, not deny it, and get ready for it. We are a bit late in getting ready for it. First of all, because so far, until now, until this year, I think, we refused to have a common European approach or vision or analysis or action on this. Imagining that single member states could face a phenomenon like this all alone, which is obviously not true. Here in Bulgaria, when it comes to the eastern route, in Italy when it comes to the Mediterranean route, in Spain, or tomorrow, who knows, in Poland or in Latvia. So we'd better understand that this is a European issue that is going to stay and that we will have to deal as Europeans all together, looking at all different directions altogether. And we have 4 different things we can do to manage this, or to start managing this in a reasonable way. First is the immediate. The immediate is obviously, and I know this is very much debated in Bulgaria and in other countries, especially in the Western Balkans, the borders and the routes. As it is, and it was debated across the Mediterranean, the borders and the routes, with the difference that the land border is there, the sea is there, but it's much more complicated, but also the land border is much complicated, especially when it's flat or when it's extended or when it's not possible to be secured. Mountains are also very difficult to check. So that is the most evident element on which we can work. Then we have the immediate other element attached to it, which is the criminal networks working on routes and borders. Because the links with international organized crime, with connections with all other kinds of trafficking in the Balkans, in the southern shore of the Mediterranean, being it arms, being it illicit traffics, being it money laundering, being it terrorism, is huge and has huge ramifications we have to tackle. On the Mediterranean side, we have started this operation, this naval operation, in 2 months, unanimously. It's working at the moment. In 3 days, it's going to reach the full capacity. and hopefully also going to move forward to the further steps, tackling the smugglers and traffickers network. Not only for the sake of the human lives we can save in this way, but also because facing the criminal organizations that are trafficking and smuggling people is also a way of preventing other kinds of crimes and instabilities. Again, with ramifications depending on the areas, with terrorism, with other forms of criminal organizations. The third element is what happens outside of our borders and a little bit further, a little bit beyond what we see. When I was in Italy, I was visiting several times refugee centers, Lampedusa, and the story you hear every time is don't focus that much, but apart from focusing that much on the trip at sea, look at what happens before. Look at what happens before we get to the shores of the Mediterranean. Look at all the way across the desert. Look at what happens in the countries of origin. All the way to the Mediterranean shores, there's 100 times more of drama and dramatic situations and people losing lives and abuses and terrible things. And a lot of money going into the circle of criminal organizations. So we have, and this is something we are finally developing as Europeans, to work with countries of origin, countries on transit, and international agencies like UNHCR and IOM to make sure that we don't only tackle the last part of the trip, but we move backwards to the root causes and to all the way of the trips of desperation. And this requires partnership, first of all with the African countries, with the African Union, and with Turkey, with our Asian partners, being it Pakistan, Afghanistan, and all the way. This is a huge, huge work to do. But we have to finally start doing it for serious, because it's a kind of work that doesn't pay off immediately, so no politician will ever invest too much in it because it doesn't pay off in the time of a mandate. But if you think of who will be sitting at our place in 10 years from now, if we don't do it now, they will have exactly the same problem multiplied by hundreds. Then there is another element which has to do also with credibility, which is, I think, a very important word, when it comes to what we do inside our borders. Here, this is not my institutional responsibility, but it's my political responsibility as I'm part of a collegial effort in the Commission and in the Council inside the European Union, which is, if it's a European problem, we have to tackle it in a European way when it comes to border control, when it comes to fighting traffickers, when it comes to cooperation with countries of origin and transit, when it comes to international dimension, and when it comes to sharing not the burden, I refuse to say burden referring to human beings, but the responsibility of welcoming people that are looking for a refugee status. It also means that we have to share the responsibility of sending back people that are economic migrants and have no rights to stay. But I think that here we still have to work a lot, because we've done a little bit of progress in sharing, but the frontline countries, like Bulgaria is, like other countries are, know very well that if we don't have a real system of sharing the welcoming of refugees, this is not sustainable for any of the member states. And this is going to destroy the sense of European solidarity. And once it can be Italy needing help, once can be Bulgaria needing help, once can be a Baltic country needing help, another time can be Greece or Portugal or you don't know what. And the basic principle of a family is that you help each other because, first of all, because there is a relationship, so it's natural to help each other. Here, I'm afraid we still have to work a little bit. but also because you know that one day you might need the same. And so it's also an interest to help each other. It's not only out of good feelings. Here, I think we still need to work, because the fact that we started sharing responsibility, but we're not really there yet, is also undermining our credibility outside. When we go, and I do, to Jordan, or to Turkey even, or to Lebanon, or to Morocco, and you argue for cooperation on managing the flows, and you have in front of you a minister that has to deal with 2 million refugees on their territory, and they know, and you know that they know, that we have been fighting for 1,000 more, 1,000 less, your credibility in terms of being the big European Union gets to zero. Gets to zero. So as strong as we manage to be internally, that reflects on our external capacity to build partnerships.
Thanks. That's a great moment to turn to Mrs. Kuneva, who is overseeing the migration issue in the Bulgarian government.
So just without any question, I really have
Well, I think the question is, how do you see this solidarity sharing?
Yeah, no, I understand you correctly, but well, I believe that all of us, we know the data. We know that the refugee flow increased 5 times if we compare with the last 3 years. We also know that 20% of the national budget, which is dedicated to the national security, is now dedicated to migration, which is not easy for us. I think that you've been quite clear about the importance of common European policy. I'm not going to repeat the Frontex, the different operations, the different struggles, until we arrive to what Commissioner Avramopoulos proposed last time, and I'm sure that you are fully aware that Bulgaria had taken obligation for the 500 more based on resettlement. For us, it's very important also from which country to resettle. Of course, our border with Turkey is, well, obviously, this is the country from where resettlement will become more more important. I think that it's good to stress that Bulgarian government signed up a common agreement with Greece and Turkey. It was, I believe, three months ago, which is really kind of a landmark for our efforts in this respect. Also, the readmission with Turkey is part of this picture and very important for Bulgaria. We have a problem which is very much related to integration. And if I had more time, I would have preferred to talk not so much about resettlement and relocation, but more about migration. More about integration of the migrants. And I think that the European Union could be more clever in setting up a framework which is not a straitjacket. It's really kind of a masterpiece how to do it. But for example, in Bulgaria, refugees coming from Syria, they have already kind of a diaspora which been for some decades in the country because of the educational reasons before. I mean, there is a tradition about this. So for our policy of integration, this is very important. I wouldn't take much of your time to talk about what are the features of in a country like Bulgaria, with still high unemployment, with the language which is not very popular, and you need really to make a plan for your life for the next, let's say, 10 or 20 years. And take a very, very difficult decision. What kind of health you can receive, what kind of education, what could you do with this language, how you are able to integrate or not so much. This is all pending and very important questions. We don't take integration policy like something which is just a matter of a good action plan, and that's it. This is much more beyond.
Thanks a lot. I would like to go back to the external aspect, though. Mrs. Kuneva just mentioned Syria. We have quite a number of refugees from Syria. Isn't this whole crisis also a result of our failing, us as the EU and its member states, our failing with, in Syria, for example, the problems in Iraq, and in general, how do we deal with this trade-off between security and embracing transitional countries in the south and in the east? How do we deal with countries like Tunisia or countries like Ukraine, where obviously people would leave not for the same reasons as others?
Well, that's exactly the core question, because Federica mentioned that we should not only focus on the consequences, because the fight against the smugglers, the readmission agreements, the integration process and programs, and so on, those are only, that is treating the consequences. What we need to do, and what we should have done much earlier, is to try and work with the countries, who are risk countries, in order to strengthen their institutions in a way that they assure better life for their own citizens. You can't stop exodus with guarding borders, but that is clear. Whatever you do, whatever smugglers you, whatever chains of smugglers you destroy, whatever strict control you put on your borders, whatever kind of mechanisms for readmission and cooperation with other countries you develop, if there's a critical number and mass of people who want to move, they will. And then it poses not only demographic problems and challenges, but also security challenges. Because we don't have to forget about the fact that with those people who are running away from the horror of the war, there will be others who will try to infiltrate and actually will be dangerous for the European security architecture in the future. We don't have to forget that another thing. There's a difference between refugees and illegal migrants on economic basis. We need to make this distinction for the sake of our citizens and treat the different categories differently. And focusing on those countries where the problems come from, here we need to actually allocate more resources. Before becoming a minister, I'm coming from the democracy development environment, democracy promotion environment. And I have to say, this is the way how we need to cooperate also with other countries. Not only strengthening our relations in terms of security and defense and trying to pose barriers in front of the people in third countries, but also work with their governments so that they can create stable, responsible, transparent institutions which are capable of providing secure and viable environment, so that the people who live in those countries are not motivated to move around for economic reasons or God forbid because of war and conflicts. But that's what's happening. And this is not a phenomenon that has emerged yesterday. It has emerged a long time ago. And we were somehow resistant of recognizing it. And I'm very happy that now, under the leadership of Federica, we managed to put this question on the table very seriously in the European Council and start thinking about it. But it is a little bit already late. But anyway, better now than in a moment in which it becomes completely uncontrollable. So I am very much a defender of the idea that we need to work with countries of origin in order to strengthen rule of law, transparency, responsibility, everything which we know that brings results, because those people who come to Europe, they come because of the way the Europeans live, because of the conditions which the architecture of the society has created. They recognize, I mean, it's a natural way of recognizing where people feel good and where they don't. So that is a legitimate assumption on our side that we can actually promote that. We need to promote that. And we were doing it, but we somehow lost the confidence in it because very often when we're trying to do that, we're immediately accused of being neo-colonizers, or I don't know what else, imperialists, dirty capitalists, and I don't know what else. Well, that's what we need to fight as in terms of propaganda. But at the same time, we know this is good and we need to fight for it. We know that what we believe in for now has brought results. And all the people who come to us are a proof for that.